Alright, so today I wanted to make a video about first focal plane scopes versus second focal plane. For people who are already very experienced in the shooting world, you probably already know this. But for newer people, or maybe people that are getting a little more into things, this is something that a lot of people look into. Um, Getting a new scope. Do I go with first focal plane, second focal plane, or what is even the difference? Now, the basic difference is that Um, first focal plane, I mean, you take the easiest way to explain it is the classic example. You have a mil dot reticle, which aren't that popular anymore, but it's the easiest way to explain it. Um, in a first focal plane scope, on a mil dot reticle, the mils in the reticle will always equal 1 mil no matter what power you have the scope on, right? If it's a 4 to 16, no matter what, whether it's 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 16, doesn't matter. The amount of distance between the mils will always be a mil. Now, on a second focal plane scope, that's not the case. Usually it will equal a mil at a certain power, which will vary scope to scope, brand to brand. You'll have to look into that for yourself. Um, so that's the difference. Now, that begs the question, okay, well, which one do I go with, or which one should I want? And the answer is it all depends. If you're target shooting, especially if you're long range shooting, um, you're going to want to go with first focal plane, or at least I would highly recommend first focal plane. If it's just for hunting, if it's just for messing around with, nothing serious, you can probably get away with second focal plane, right? Um, Another big difference between first focal plane, second focal plane. First focal plane is generally going to be more expensive, not always. I've seen some expensive second focal plane scopes and some cheap first focal plane ones, but on average, first focal plane is going to be more expensive. So again, if you're not looking to spend a whole lot, probably makes the decision rather easy. But this is from the Bushnell website. They basically have some points here. Um, Pros of a first focal plane: crosshairs are easily visible at higher magnifications. The subtension remains constant across all magnification. Cons: price is often higher. Reticle can be considered pretty small when being used at low power. Difficult to see in low light and low power. I've never had any issue in low light personally, but on low power that definitely is the case. But again, I usually prefer a little higher anyway, so personally that's not a big issue. Second focal plane, easily visible crosshairs across all magnification settings and no change in crosshair size, making it easier to see, especially for those using scopes for hunting. Easier to use in lower magnification, cheaper since they're easier to produce. Cons: altering subtensions makes them accurate only at predetermined magnification levels, not always reliable for variable long range shooting. So again, um, that is the basic difference. Like I say, people are probably wondering which one do I go with. Like I say, if you're going to be using it for long range shooting or like target shooting, um, probably going to want to go with first focal plane because you want to be able to shoot, see where you missed, see, oh, that's a half a mil. I'm going to come up a half a mil or come over a half a mil or just input it into your scope. With a second focal plane, unless you're at a certain power, you're not going to be able to use your reticle to measure how much you miss by. Or another way of doing it would be you are, maybe you're sighting the gun in, maybe you're sighting it in at a new distance, maybe you're confirming your zero, after, for whatever. It's very easy to be shooting at 100 yards or 200 yards, take your shot, see your group. Oh, I'm half a mil high or half a mil low. Just bring it up a half a mil and you're good to go. At least assuming your scope is good quality and you're actually a quality shooter, which usually is the case. And scopes are pretty good these days, and people are decent at least at 100 yards. Most people should be able to shoot a good group at 100 yards, but um, that is the benefits. Now again, if it's just a run-of-the-mill hunting scope, if it's just a, even if maybe it's for target shooting, but you're not going to shoot long range, or you can probably get away with second focal plane. So at the end of the day, there's no, you absolutely positively need a first focal plane, or it doesn't matter. The only situation where I would say that you absolutely positively do want a first focal plane is if you're going to be using it for long range shooting, or you're like a hardcore target shooter. Then yeah, you're absolutely going to want first focal plane. Like that's the one situation where it's pretty much a must. Aside from that, it really doesn't matter that much. So that is basically the difference. Um, like I said, there's no, first focal plane scopes genuinely are gonna be higher quality, but not always. Like I say, I've seen some really expensive second focal plane scopes that are really high quality. Doesn't necessarily, again, first focal plane, second focal doesn't necessarily guarantee quality or lack thereof. Like I say, like the quality of even cheap scopes these days has gone up pretty drastically, even in like the last 10 years. Like it's, the quality is getting better very, very fast, faster than what a lot of people think. So most scopes these days are they're quality scopes, right? The amount of scopes these days that are complete garbage, few and far between. And and a lot of times too, a lot of people, they don't use scopes for their intended purpose. Like it'll be like an entry level scope that clearly is designed for like 22s, maybe like a 223 or like a 22 250 at most. And you see these guys and like, oh yeah, I put it on a 300 Win Mag or a 338 Win Mag, and oh yeah, it wouldn't hold zero or whatever. Like, well yeah, it's the scope's clearly, it's a $200 scope. Like $150 scope. Like, why would you put it on a 300 Win Mag? Like, it doesn't make, not what it, clearly not what it's made for, right? So that's other things that need to come into play too. Like, you want to make sure that your scope can hold up to things. And even if they say that it's been tested on things, I would want to see other people have confirmed that, because it's money you're spending, right? You don't want to waste said money. So um, those are other things that come into it as well. Like you gotta pair scopes with what they're designed for. Like scopes and optics these days are becoming increasingly diversified. There is some crossover as well, but there's a lot of scopes that it would make no sense to use them on a hunting rifle and vice versa. So that's another thing you really need to keep in mind too, is that is the scope I'm buying, is it designed for the intended purpose I'm using it for? Now, it is usually fairly easy to tell. Like you can usually tell just by looking at it, right? And other ways as well. Like a hunting scope is not going to have a very fancy reticle, right? It's usually going to be a fairly simple reticle because again, you're just using it for hunting. It's probably not going to have exposed turrets, but sometimes it's probably going to be fairly light. Again, there's just ways you can tell just by looking at, just by feeling a scope, whether what it's designed for usually. And there will even be different designs even in and of themselves, right? There'll be scopes that are 22 scopes, right? 22 just for plinking around. Scopes may be used for some bigger hunting rifles, and then the same goes for the target scopes. There's scopes that are target scopes that are designed for 22s, 223s, stuff like that, and then scopes for 50 BM. Not that you can't use it scope for anything, you really could if you wanted, but you know that's another thing you really have to keep in mind. Basically, I think people know what I'm getting at, but anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.